Hello, hello, hello. This is Misty Magdalena Grace with the new and improved version of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, where we talk about spirituality, psychedelics, plant medicine, microdosing, and really that journey within to finding your best innate wisdom, to your best health, your best wealth through all sorts of inner child healing, trauma release, grief recovery, overcoming addictions, and working with the mind, the body, and spirit. So go ahead, leave a review, subscribe, download. We look forward to your feedback. Thanks for tuning in today. Well, hello, everyone. Happy May Day at the time of this recording. If you celebrate, it's May Day, also known as Beltane, to those of us who love the old school pagan holidays, and just really excited to be talking about, I think, a very appropriate topic. I know we scheduled this, Dr. Kulvi, to kind of go a little bit with the theme, and I just want to welcome everyone. If you're new to my channel, I'm Misty Magdalena Grace. I go by Magdalena for short, and we're here to really help inspire you, equip and educate you on different tools, different consciousness tools, as well as health. Wealth experts come, and this is an amazing couple of weeks, because if you were on my previous shows, you saw we had two powerhouse women. We have another powerhouse woman here today. So if you like what you see and what you hear, please subscribe to my channel, hit the share button below. Sharing is caring. And it's really exciting today because I've two quick things before we dive right in. I actually officially now have at healthyandwealthyandwise.com. If you go there, you can subscribe to my newsletter and get the shows, but also get a lot of amazing health, wealth, and consciousness expansion, education, blog posts, things of that nature. So if you go to Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, go there and subscribe today. And I'm just really excited to have you here, Dr. Kulvi. We're going to get right into it because we've never had anyone on the show that has talked about epigenetics. And so I'm going to actually let you explain what that is, because you're going to be much better at it than me. But we've talked a lot about ancestral trauma, and I have shared a lot of my journey of my own healing and my karmic path and past life stuff and ancestral stuff. So I'm just really excited to have met you through the yoga community in my kundalini certification training. So everybody, you're in for a treat. Dr. Kulvi, she's a yogi, spiritual seeker, and a scientist. So I just love the combination of all that you are, and excited for you to share your story today and teach us more about epigenetics.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such a joy to be here with you. And thank you for the reminder that it's May Day. This was actually a really big deal at Oxford. We would watch the choir sing in the day from the Tower of Magdalen Tower, from the top of Magdalen Tower every May Day. So it was a really, really well celebrated at Oxford. And then spend the day watching the Morris dancers and all that good stuff. So as I just mentioned, my academic training was at the University of Oxford. And epigenetics is something that came to me a little more recently than my formal academic training in genomic medicine. And it really opened up a whole new understanding of what we could leverage from the information contained in the genome. And so you mentioned ancestral trauma. And epigenetics is just the mechanism by which we can look at how a cell can carry the stories of our ancestors through multiple generations. It's also the science of how our cells interact with our environment. And it's a really, really fascinating area of science. It literally means above genetics. And I've come to play with epigenetics really in the sense of how we can come to reconcile some of maybe the subconscious behaviors that we exhibit on a day-to-day basis without really understanding where those subconscious behaviors come from, and see how they can actually be visualized in our cells through the language of epigenetics. I would also caution that it's a fun, exciting, multisyllabic word, but it's not, it doesn't supersede the sacred of what we're talking about here in terms of healing and being able to access our ancestral wisdom and access our past and understand how we can transmute experiences of our ancestors and experiences of our childhood that don't necessarily enable us to live fully in this given moment. So I would like to put that on there. That it's a fun language. It's an interesting language. I love learning this language, and there's something way deeper and way more beautiful than knowing a fancy, exciting word.
Yeah, it's like a combination of spirituality and science, really. It's what I'm hearing from you. The ancestral component, they lived so long ago, but they're still in our blood, our bones, our DNA, and then you get to study the genomic patterns of that. I mean, I know for a lot of people who aren't scientists out there, I think it'd be cool if you don't mind. I remember when I was listening to your story when you spoke to our certification program of just how your life was shaped by your ancestors, by your epigenetics, and from India to Oxford to here. Anything that you want to share, how you've seen that play out in your life?
Sure. And I would predicate that with the idea that our ancestors passed down their stories to try to keep us safe in future generations, um, without any knowledge of what future generations would look like. So, as you just mentioned, my ancestral history is that of the villages of India, from the Punjab region of India. And in addition to that, I come from the India has a social stratification system called the caste system, and my ancestral history of that is of the lowest caste in Indian society. And so the story that I would have needed to know, given my ancestral origin, is that it's not safe to be seen, it's not safe to be heard. Number one, I'm a female, and number one, I'm an untouchable female. And that gave me quite a contrast when I ended up in the halls of Oxford University, where at the top of this social stratification system, we actually have the academics. And so I found that my outer environment was that of an academic, and then my inner cellular environment was that of somebody who ought not be heard or seen. And so epigenetics gave me a language to bridge that gap and ultimately work towards healing that gap. And sometimes I find language personally fascinating, and sometimes I find that in the absence of the capacity to feel, which was my experience back then, I couldn't feel, I couldn't reconcile the difference in my body because I didn't know how to access it. And the language of epigenetics gave me a forum with which to access this disconnect that I was feeling between my insides and outsides, and ultimately have the opportunity towards seeing how some of those ancestral stories, which would have kept me safe in that environment, were no longer serving me in my new environment.
Wow, that's amazing. You said so many good things there. I heard environment, bridging the gap. You hear of these different things that, I've talked about this a lot on my podcast, where you end up either marrying your childhood wounds, your father, mother wound, or you have friends, you have all this karma, especially now on the planet, that we're getting to look in the mirror of healing. And so I'm trying to keep this really simple, my question. But environment and your vibe attracting your tribe and who you're surrounded by, when there's a cognitive dissonance like that, like you had, like the academic and the cellular, how does one begin to heal or bridge that gap, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it does. And so for me, the way the dissonance manifested was in an inability to speak. So I would be asked to share some of my research, and my throat would close, and like the words just wouldn't manifest. I couldn't breathe in those moments. And what I came to learn was that I had the anatomy of somebody who was very reactive to environments that required me to be seen and be heard. And as I came to understand that, I just asked myself, well, okay, so you are reactive now. Can you do something that is responsive in that moment? And it was, for me, it was wiggle your big toe. That scene from the movie Kill Bill where Uma Thurman is sitting there saying, just wiggle your big toe, stays with me, because I'm like, well, that is one thing that I can do differently in this moment where my body is moving into reactivity, but I know that I want to respond appropriately to the environment. And the appropriate response to the environment would have been to share some of the exciting things that were happening in the laboratory that I was deeply passionate about and so fascinated by, some observations that blew my mind and rocked my world, and I really wanted to share them. And yet I didn't have the capacity to share because I didn't feel safe in that moment, because my cells were telling me that this environment isn't your environment. And so then just gradually over time and healing, just learning, well, okay, I'm reacting in this moment, and this reaction doesn't serve me and doesn't serve the people who I'm here to serve, the people who I'm here to share these observations with. And so can I take this journey towards responsiveness? Can I lengthen that line between the environmental stimulus of, you're asking me a question, what's your name, to the response, Dr. Kulvi Kaur, who worked on this project, whose words I would rehearse them in the mirror for hours. And when it came to actually speaking them, they just wouldn't come out. And then just gradually over time, I think, and healing and learning and all of the modalities that you mentioned in your introduction, they've all kind of helped to shift these, I'll call them lesions or stories or whatever, shift the patterns of my cells into a new manifestation, which enables me to be much more responsive to what my environment is asking of me in a given moment.
Yep, I got a bunch of other questions. Let me write this down. Out of curiosity, and I know this is kind of a personal question, I'm going to share my own personal experience as well, either way. So did you find that when you left that environment, was it easier in the next environment? Did it even just changing the environment make a difference for you to be able to be seen, be heard more?
Yes and no. I believe that my soul's journey took me to a space where my healing could be accelerated. I always thought that I was going to be at Oxford forever. I thought that, I would, just go through the Oxford trajectory of academic, postdoc, whatever, writing grants and, just stalking the halls of Oxford and having a great time and discovering forever. And at the end of my postdoc, actually, I was invited to continue my research out in the US. They decided that I was an alien of extraordinary abilities. They gave me this cool thing called an Einstein visa, which still cracks me up today because Einstein's just one of the coolest people that ever lived, in my opinion. So amazing. And so the environment that I found myself in San Diego was much more conducive to this exploration for me personally.
Beautiful. Thank you. That was a personal question. So I honor your sacred yes in sharing that. And I mentioned that because I found myself, again, I always like to give personal experiences because how this has touched my life. I feel it connects with the audience because there's so many women like you and me who, if you're in an environment where you didn't feel seen or heard, or in my case, I found myself in environments in business, in life, where I put on masks. I was afraid to speak my truth. So I developed an autoimmune disease in the throat. And everything that I said, not everything, a lot of it was to please other people, the people pleasing, the codependency, the mentors, the coaches, kind of modeled what I call the masculine father wound in me. The good girl, I gotta be a good girl. I gotta say the right thing. I gotta do the right thing, or else, something bad could happen, past life stuff, all of that too, similar energy. Otherwise, why did I, have a throat disease that I manifested? So using that as an example, I'm just curious if you noticed, and again, kind of a personal question, ways that not being seen, besides being afraid to speak, were there other health issues or any other things that you're caring to share on how that manifested in your journey?
Yeah, I think It manifests in myriad ways every day that prevent us from living fully. So, I'm debilitatingly shy. I mentioned unable to speak. Just, but I think, anything that stops you from living in the fullness of life, in the joy of life, in the excitement of life, be it the physical manifestation of imbalance in the body, like what we would call disease, or emotional manifestations, like just inability to go about your day, all of the above. Absolutely.
I think it's important because there's so many people, and I don't know if you know this, I have a passion for suicide, mental health. Every September, Suicide Awareness Month, we honor that, we observe that. There's a lot of people struggling with mental health now, grief because of the election. And again, I don't talk politics, but there's just a lot of reasons on our planet right now that I believe are calling us to all go in and heal for our ancestors, heal at the cellular level. So I say that as an encouragement for those listening. If you're having trouble, like she said, going through your day, or you're trying to find your voice or whatever, you're not alone. So just know that this is all coming up for all of us now, by us, to heal the planet and to hopefully get closer and closer to unity consciousness and living a more fulfilling life. However, we got to go through the shadows first. And that's a good segue to what I wanted to ask you next. I'm not going to say it correctly because you're the scientist and much more intelligent sounding than me about this stuff. But, you talk about the cellular level. So a lot of times I'll use the language, you can't heal what you don't feel. You can't heal what you don't name. So can you use those phrases to talk about how epigenetics, as the cells and the DNA transform, or again, whatever words you need to use, how that actually happens at the science level?
Yeah, that was wonderfully eloquent, actually. And I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier as well. I didn't know what I was feeling, or that I was feeling bad, because I didn't necessarily know any different. I didn't know there was a new possibility available to me, maybe is one way of articulating it. So I didn't feel good, and I wasn't living a full life, but what I felt was what I knew. Um, and then when I had a language that I could superimpose on that feeling of, oh, actually, there is a story that has been passed down through my DNA, that was an important part of my story and would have kept me safe, that is now holding me back from living in the fullness of my being. The story then was able to help me to articulate what I was feeling. And then that's really where the kind of confluence of having a language that I could put on my lack of feeling then gave me the capacity to feel. And then I could feel, so I could heal, in a sense.
Beautiful. Awesome. That was fantastic. Yeah. So that, just from the scientific perspective, just shows that a lot of us, like myself, I just numbed out. I didn't want to feel anything. Right.
Mm.
And a lot of us, I think, not only women, but especially women, but also men. And especially because I came from, my sales background, personal development, self-help movement was really, really big in the 80s and 90s, and growing up in sales. And that, you always had to stay positive, think and grow rich, just, don't focus on any of that shadowy, dark stuff. Right. But until you really name it and understand it as fear of rejection, or not feeling enough, because that was literally the story your family probably had in India, it sounds like. So that is inside of you. So no matter how many books you read, or affirmations you say, right, it's still inside of you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you pass that back with great love. That I would also say that I really do believe that those stories were passed on with deep love to keep us safe, and with equal love, you pass them back to where they came from, because if they're no longer keeping you safe, then they've served their purpose.
Yeah, that's why I talk about the work that you do, we do, you know, all of the things that the modalities that you said were in the intro, a lot of it is healing you at that level where you're healing generations back and forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
literally changing the DNA. I know you touched on this in the presentation at our yoga certification. If you could pick one, I know there was scientific studies that you shared that could maybe share a little bit more on that level too.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the most famous ones is a study that was conducted on victims of the Dutch famine. So there was a period after the Second World War when there was no food permitted into the country, and it was horrendous. Like thousands and thousands of people starved to death. And scientists actually looked at the DNA of individuals who were in their mother's wombs during the period of the Dutch famine, and then compared their epigenetics to the epigenetics of their siblings, either conceived before the Dutch famine or conceived afterwards, and found really significant. This is 6 decades later that the study was done. Found really significant differences in the epigenetic markers of the individuals who were being gestated during the famine, genes related to um, metabolism, um, fat deposition, diabetes were dysregulated in those individuals who were in the womb during the famine. And if you think about the story these mothers needed their unborn babies to know, it was that food was scarce. So you must um, hold food in your body, or like keep, keep that, keep food on your system. Whereas the siblings who were born either side didn't have that story passed on to them. I just think it's a really, really compelling, and there are multiple, as you mentioned, there are a myriad of really, really fascinating studies looking at how what our child needed us to know, what our baby needed us to know, the studies done in veterans, what that individual who went out to serve and be in a very, very, very stressful environment, what that individual needed the person who returned back to society to know. Their genes are fundamentally changed by the trauma that they encounter daily. Our genes are fundamentally changed by our experiences during childhood, gestation, ancestry. And again, if those fundamental changes aren't serving us, there are healing modalities, many of which you share with the world, that transmute those stories. And you actually see it physically. You see the epigenetic markers in those cells no longer be there once that wound is healed.
That's amazing. I love that. I love that. I think that's literally you can't prove anything more than looking at that. Is that a test that anyone can take? Like, I don't even know how you would do that.
Um, I don't know that it's necessarily a test that is offered like commercially right now. However, a laboratory could absolutely conduct those tests. And so I think one of the other things that I forgot to mention is that I play in the intersection between genetics, anatomy, and behavior. And so when the gene changes, that changes the anatomy. And then when the anatomy changes, that changes the behavior. And so breaking out of that cycle of genetics, anatomy, and behavior is really, within the context of this language of epigenetics, is the foundation of healing. But yeah, I hope one day that these kind of tests will be. I mean, it's a great question. I've just recently founded my own biotech company that I aspire to have um, exactly the answer to your question. Could this be a test that you could have in the lab? And the way I envisage it is that you would provide a biospecimen at the beginning of, or as a baseline biospecimen, and then we would monitor and track your epigenetic factors over time, over your journey, and see how they shifted in response to your therapeutic modality. So
Yeah, I
absolutely.
would love that. Sign me up. I'll be your guinea pig. Whatever you can do. Here's another wild question. I love this topic. So we could go for all day, but I know we've got limited time. This may be one of my last questions, but and maybe shoot, I just lost it. Dang it. I wish I had written it down. Let me think about this for a second. Well, actually, let's talk about yoga. Since you and I met through Kundalini Yoga and you were teaching, what does being a yogi or Kundalini Yoga as one modality, since we both love it, how does that impact our epigenetics and our healing?
So I think the ancient practice of the yogic technologies, the ancient wisdom technologies, if they speak to you on a deep level, then absolutely there's data to show that they shift you. The reason I'm sort of somewhat hesitating right now in my answer is that the modern kind of manifestation of Kundalini yoga um, isn't something that I fully resonate with, but I definitely resonate with the deep origins of this technology from its conception. And yeah, these technologies were designed to optimize our anatomy so that we could be still and receive our higher wisdom.
Hmm.
And as we optimizing our anatomy, I mean, yes, it means being able to sit still in meditation, but it also means to have our mind be still in meditation too. And my experience of the ancient yogic wisdom technologies is that not only has it rebalanced my anatomy, my physical anatomy, it's also given my mind the space to really start to transmute some of these stories. I love the feeling of getting lost in asana, but yoga to me will always be the unity of feeling that connection to something greater than myself and receiving that wisdom, but creating the space in my body to be able to receive that wisdom, if that makes sense.
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't expect everyone listening out there to be yogis, but in general, what I'm hearing you say is like you're communing with your higher self, the divine within. And if you set an intention, which most yoga teachers will tell you to set an intention, it's like your opportunity to transmute, to alchemize, ancestral stuff if you want to. Like I do a lot of ancestral ceremonial work with myself, my clients. So it's obviously top of mind. Maybe you don't go to a yoga class to say, hey, I want to heal grandma. You know what I mean? But it can work. I just had a client yesterday. We were talking about it, and she said after a session, with me, literally the next day, her mom said her blood work turned out perfect, and her daughter had been doing a lot of work with me, and so we were just kind of like, oh my gosh, because that was her intention. So I'm just putting that out there, right? Our words are powerful. Our hearts are powerful.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm done.
Made me think that, a walk in nature is yoga. Standing on the beach watching the sunset is yoga. Like washing the dishes can be yoga. It's really like how you are in the world can be yoga. It doesn't have to be what happens on a yoga mat in a studio. It can be the way you can walk through the world in unity consciousness. And there can be a deep healing that can come from that too.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Absolutely. It doesn't have to be complicated. It
That's
can
what I meant to say.
be very connected to, and that's what our ancestors would have done too, you know, because they didn't have smartphones, they didn't have the internet. You know, on May Day, they're dancing around the maypole, you know, and celebrating and all of that. I actually remembered my question. This will be my last question, other than what I normally ask at the very end. So just if there's anything else you want to share. So part of my journey with healing ancestral trauma, and at the cellular level, because I came into this body, I believe, this is my belief. I don't say everyone has to agree with me, but I'd love your thoughts on this. I believe I chose this family of origin. I chose this body. I chose this family of origin who had these ancestors where we had alcoholism running the family, mental illness running the family. My mom, you know, was suicidal and thankfully wasn't successful, although she probably could have been a couple times. It was really close. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And, you know, even autoimmune disease. So like these things were always in the back of my mind. And then I came into this body and sure enough, I had 12 friends that died by suicide. I've had a lot of clients who've had the same autoimmune disease as me. And of course, now I have a huge connection to the addiction and recovery community. So it's like your karma, your epigenetics can become your dharma. And to me, that is like an honor, a blessing, a gift. Now, a few years ago, I'd be like, screw this life. I'm out of here. Could I be done? You know what I mean? But maybe can you speak something to that, what I just shared, just how the beauty of it is once you do transmute it on the other side, it just makes so much sense why we're alive and why we're here.
Yeah, what you're sharing really resonates with me too. I really enjoy this exploration of, did I choose this particular manifestation this time round because this was the vehicle through which I could be most of service? And yeah, I really understand what you're saying, and it really feels true to me too, that yes, it's painful. I would never negate anybody's pain around the vehicle that they chose or the vessel that they chose. And yet there is something really beautiful on the other side of pain, but also, and if you can access that space also within the pain as well.
Mm.
And it's not, you know, humaning is complicated, and humaning is really, really hard. And yet here we are at this particular point in human history, this inflection point for humanity at this time when we're being called up to be something, to say something, to do something. But we're a different manifestation of what we could be as a race that occupies this earth, as a people that occupy this earth. I think, I don't think there's any accidents. I truly believe that we chose to be here. We chose to be here for this particular inflection point. And maybe even as stewards of this transition,
Mm-hmm.
stewards of this move to a new way of being for humanity. And that's stewardship. That stewardship comes at a price. That stewardship is a privilege and a responsibility. And to be a part of that stewardship, there's a path that you go through. You mentioned the dark night of the soul, and I just wonder, like, on the other side of that, can you be in stewardship more? Can you be more present, more available, more sacred,
Yeah.
more here? And I don't know the answers to these questions, but they're things that I think about a lot.
I'll say hell yes. I'm not saying that I've arrived, okay, but I will say that dark night of the soul, like I've been excavating ancestral shit and all sorts of darkness and like ego dissolution. I don't call it ego death anymore, even though in the psychedelic space you hear that phrase, but it's more of a dissolving of the ego, making friends with the ego. And I share this usually only during Suicide Awareness Month, but I'm just going to put this quote out there. You know, the two most important days in your life, Mark Twain said, are the day you are born and the day you find out why.
Mm.
And I really got that myself last year. And I share that now because I know the suicide rate is slowly creeping up, and mental health is just, it's a jungle out there for a lot of people, and these economic times and political times and warring times. So I think I just want to encourage the listeners with our message today, because she is a very powerful story, and as science proves it, that you're here for a purpose. You just got to keep going, and the only way is through, right? The valley of the shadows. And once you do get on the other side, and again, I still got ways to go, I'm much more alive. I'm much more excited about my purpose and passion now. But it took me like 40 flipping years of deep excavation to get here.
Resonate, absolutely.
And
we have another 40 ahead of us.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know if you ever watch astrology. Heather Ensworth, she talks about it. She calls our all of us that we're walking each other home to this new earth to becoming homo luminous ones instead of the homo sapien, the homo luminous, the light, right? So that goes back to the goal of unity consciousness. And as you heal yourself, you help me, I help you. We're all here to encourage and support one another in our healing process, I think.
Absolutely.
Is there anything that you haven't shared yet, as we start to wrap it down, that you would like to share, that's on your heart about this topic? And then, of course, where can people find you?
Oh, I think I've really enjoyed this conversation. I'm really, truly grateful for the work that you do and the healing that you embody. And I think you just articulated it so beautiful. In your healing lies my healing, and in our healing lies global healing. And not from an egotistical space or whatever you want to call that, but from a space of just deep yearning for better, for more, for the 8-9 billion other people that we share this earth with. Yearning for them to know that this world that we live in can be so much more with their active, joyful participation, or their active, wonderful part, their active presence, their active willingness to engage. It's funny when I'm asked how do you get a hold of me, or how do you learn more? The truth is, I was about to say you don't necessarily. I'm somewhat coming out of hiding now. I mean, I mentioned masks earlier. I've hidden my sacred behind the mask of data and science and multisyllabic, inaccessible words for a really long time. And I'm just really coming to the understanding no more. I'm not interested in that anymore. I love data. I find it fascinating, but I don't love data because it makes me something that I'm not, or it makes me seem like something I'm not. I love data because as a window, as a tool to access something bigger than themselves, or a tool to broaden somebody's mind. And I realize that this absolutely doesn't answer the question of how can we find out more about a website, drkulvi.com. It's under construction, or I actually don't know what's on it right now. I think just a massive picture of my face and a contact form, and that's it. But yeah, I hope to have opportunities to share more as I learn more in the future.
Yeah, we'll have you come back. And I know you're on LinkedIn, because that's actually where I connected with you.
Yes,
so is it okay if I share your LinkedIn profile with everyone?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Perfect. Beautiful. Well, I have one final closing question for Dr. Kulvi before we do just some quick announcements for the community. You've probably already seen this, but if you haven't already, if you saw value in the show today, please hit the share button. We definitely covered a topic that's near and dear to my heart in a much different way, more science than spirituality in a lot of aspects, but they're a lot of times not, mutually exclusive. They blend well together. So if you know someone who's struggling with mental health, speaking their truth, health, wealth, money, financial scarcity, lack, fear, that all goes back to our ancestors for sure. And it's in our cells. So this is a very thought-provoking conversation. And if you're local to me, a week from Saturday, so May 10th, I'm having a women's circle, a yoni steam. This is something I believe our ancestors did. This is something I didn't know about until I went through my healing. And actually, the yoni, another word for vagina, is a part of a woman's body that leads to the womb. So this is great for womb healing, emotional shutdown, autoimmune disease in the throat is connected to the yoni. If you've had a miscarriage, sexual trauma, it's a really, really sacred experience to sit in circle with women. We throw in some herbs and hot, boiling, steamy water, and we sing, we cry, we pray, we get together. And so a great announcement to remind on May Day here today as well. And then the following Saturday, and you're going to hear more about this as my audience, if you're in San Diego, I'm starting to do series of what I call Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, hosting Abundance Alchemist workshops. So really targeting spiritual entrepreneurs who want to live their best health, their best wealth, and expand their consciousness. I believe you can do it all. It's actually what I've been doing and focusing on the last 25 years of my life, indirectly and directly. It's my gift back to the world. So if you're looking to improve your health, your wealth as an entrepreneur, and you want to connect with like-minded, conscious go-givers, that'll be Saturday, May 17th, and then I'll announce future dates. And you can find all this information at magdalenagrace.com if you have any desire to learn more about my upcoming events. All right, my dear. So I like to ask my first-time guests this question as we close the show out. So when you hear the phrase healthy and wealthy and wise, what does that mean to you?
Makes me think of somebody who is in alignment with their highest self. Alignment in a single word.
Beautiful. That resonates with my central nervous system. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you for gracing us with your wisdom and your story, and just rapping with me about this beautiful conversation, talking about epigenetics again with Dr. Kulvi Kaur. If you enjoyed the show, please share it. I have a little bit of a break before having some more guests later this month. I'll be having a guest talking about dreams and death. I have a death doula of the Death Network local here to San Diego. We're going to be talking about some really powerful, potent, maybe a little heavy, but really powerful topics. So I hope you can come back and tune in. Until next time, everyone, as always, here's to your best health, your best wealth, by trusting your best wisdom within. For I believe when you do that, the best is yet to come. Bye-bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, download, leave a 5-star rating or review, and also please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from this inspirational message. We hope to see you again. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel or join my Facebook community. And if you are looking to manifest your best health, your best wealth by trusting your best wisdom within, please go to my website, www.microdosingforhealth.com. Again, www.microdosingforhealth.com. to quiet your mind, get into your heart, heal your body, and manifest your best health and your best wealth. Right.